But let's start with the Greeks. I'm going to share my screen again. There we go. Okay, so physics, that's basically the discipline where we're studying the physical material world. Later, we'll be talking about metaphysics. I would include what our talk tonight is more of a metaphysical talk, because it is that which is dealing with what is outside or beyond the physical. A lot of these terms you'll already know. Psyche, of course, I hope you know, where we get the word soul from. So psychology is literally the discipline or the study of the soul. Nous, this is going to be a really important term. This is translated as mind, but it means a lot more than just your brain. And I will come back to that in a minute. Taxis, like taxonomies, that's the order of things. Cosmos, fascinating. That is the Greek word for the world. And cosmos in Greek is the antonym for chaos. So cosmos means order. So when the Greeks were looking at the world and the heavens, they believed they were seeing order. We have being, which is ousia, or essence, at Genesis, of course, becoming. I wore my becoming shirt for tonight. Anthropos, man, and logos, speech or reason. One that they left out here that I'm going to be sharing with you is cardia, where we get like cardiac. It has to do with the heart, desire, passion, feeling. So let's start with Plato. Can you see Plato's tripartite soul? All right. So this is how Plato divided up the soul into the rational part of humans, the spirited part, and the appetitive part. And these are associated with logic, emotion, desire, the brain, the heart, the belly and genitals, truth and wisdom, honor, victory, pleasure. And you can see each of these has their corresponding virtues and vices that can go with them. What's interesting to me in this is Plato has left out the nous, which I personally believe is the highest part of the human soul. And let me pull up a slide. I made a little slide for you. This is the typical one you'll see people post for people that are trichotomist. They believe humans are made of three parts: a body, soul, and spirit. You see the Greek word there for body is soma. The Greek word for soul we talked about is psyche, and the Greek word for spirit is pneuma. But I wanted to elaborate on this a little bit more for you. All right, so here I've drawn the concentric rings like they had. Here we have body equated with soma. So that's your physical material body. What the other chart did not show is there is this like transition zone between our physical body and our soul, our psyche, our soul spirit. And this is called the sarx. Now, the sarx, we find this throughout the New Testament, and it can be translated as body, but it can also be translated as the appetites that come from having a body. And this will be really important when we get into a Christian view of the self, especially when we try to figure out what is it that's causing us all these problems. And a lot of Christians think it's our soma or our body, but I have to keep reminding people your bodies are not evil. Your bodies are good. God made them. And when he was done making the human form, he said it was good, not evil. Sarx, however, these are the appetites that come. Because I have a belly, I get hungry. Because I have genitalia, I have sexual urges. Because I have physical flesh, I need to protect it from heat or cold. That's simply part of having a physical vehicle. I have to give it fuel. I have to give it rest. I have to do maintenance and care of this vehicle that my soul and spirit are dwelling in. And so sarx is kind of that interplay that comes. The appetites, even the appetites we have, are not evil in and of themselves. It's not evil to be hungry or tired or sexually aroused. The problem becomes when the sarx takes control, the appetites become the master, and no longer can our desires or our reason or our higher mind control the appetites. And the appetites run amok. And so instead of just satisfying our hunger, we become a glutton. Instead of getting the rest we need, we become slothful. Instead of using sex in the way God intended, we misappropriate it in different forms. But none of those desires or appetites are wrong in and of themselves. Then when we get into this three parts, the cardia, like I said, this represents the heart. This has to do with those high feelings of like passion and honor and these things that drive us and motivate us in our lives, these things that we really want to put desire into. Logos has more to do with like analytical reasoning, like how we evaluate a problem, how we process it, how we look at the pros and cons. But the nous, and I personally believe this is part of what separates us from other living beings. I don't think trees have a nous, and I don't think animals have a nous. And the nous is the part of the mind that contained first principles. And if you're familiar with Platonic idealism, this would be things like the good, the true, the beautiful. These were actually all synonyms for the Greeks, if you can imagine. And I also believe they're all synonyms for God himself, the good, the true, the beautiful. So the nous was this higher functioning of man, like these Platonic forms. And this isn't a little off topic tonight, but that is what I believe became separated from God with the fall. When we disobeyed God, I believe the nous became damaged. And so it had a ripple effect. So we were no longer reasoning correctly. We were no longer desiring correctly. And our appetites had run amok, and we could no longer keep them under control, either through our reason or through our passions. And so I believe part of what is being restored when we have a renewed mind, in fact, I believe it's Romans 12:2, be ye therefore transformed, metamorpho, by the renewal of your nous. And that is part of Christ making us a new creation, where he gives us a new mind, and we have access to the very mind of Christ. And then this pneuma piece, I believe this is what animates us and comes directly from God. The soul, psyche, logos, this is our like personality temperament. What makes us unique and different from other human beings, our various combinations. But this is that life spirit that God gives us. And our life is solely dependent upon God. We are contingent beings. We are not self-creating or self-sustaining. We depended on another for our existence and for our continuance. All right, I kind of fire hosed you. Any questions or comments? So, Plato, in his book, The Phaedrus, was talking about the human soul. And he used the analogy of a chariot. And so you have this chariot driver, which in my understanding for Plato was the logos. He believed your logos should have a hold of the reins, because the two horses that are pulling that chariot of your life is that sarx, your appetites, and your cardia, your passion and desires. And so you have these two steeds just plunging down, but you need that logos or reason to keep them from running amok or running into the ditch. And I personally, I love the analogy. I think it works really well. And when we think about the inner conflict we have between like our reason and our desires and our appetites, it's really colorful to put it in like a chariot driver trying to keep the whole thing moving in the right direction and all moving together. But, and I do not think I'm smarter than Plato or Aristotle, but I think he should have had the nous as the chariot driver.